anyway, we'll take it from there. All right. All right, it's 7 o'clock, and I want to thank for those that are in the audience here for joining us, and also those that are at home watching us on TV or watching us live streaming on any other kind of social media outlet. But thank you very much. This is the October 3rd regular meeting of the City Commission. We'd like to begin our meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspiring us to uphold our responsibility to do the same. Ms. Walter is not here tonight. She is ill, and so you know that. And our city attorney has been excused from being here tonight. She's got a pretty busy day tomorrow. We thought she could use the rest instead of having to put up with us tonight. So with that, I will ask for let's see here. Ms. Shamrow, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I'm going to try and match our friend from the neighborhood the other day. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You guys kept me from setting that record.
Close. Okay. With that, announcements from the city manager, please.
Yes, several items. Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners, we were noticed, and for the public, they'll want to hear this as well. In US 31 project, the Parkway, we were notified by Mr. Wagner, who is the supervisor of the local TC, the transportation office here from MDOT, that the 11 design variances that we asked for, and most importantly, the 10.5-foot wide lane widths were accepted by the Federal Highways Administration. So that's a big deal. That does not happen very often, and it is what we requested in terms of narrowing the lane widths. Also wanted to make sure that you and the public were notified that we're currently winterizing the fire hydrants. As the staff goes through the community and the neighborhoods, they drain the fire hydrants to make sure they don't freeze during the winter. And of course, they can be revitalized and utilized by the fire department upon need. And then also one of our renters, just because we want to make sure that they continue to do well, Crooked Tree at the Carnegie Building. This Friday, they have their opening reception for the fall at 5:30 to 7.
Okay, thank you. Announcements from the city clerk.
Yes, meetings to announce for this week, the week of October 3rd, are the Parking Advisory Board will meet this Wednesday, October 5th at 11 a.m. in the committee room on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The City and Garfield Township Rec Authority will meet on Wednesday, October 5th at 7 p.m. at Garfield Township Hall. The Master Plan Leadership Team is meeting this Thursday, October 6th at 4 p.m. in the training room, which is on the second floor of the Governmental Center. And finally, the Parks and Rec Commission is meeting this Thursday, October 6th at 6:30 p.m. in the Commission Chambers. Just a couple of community updates. I just wanted to remind those who are interested in staying in tune with city business and things happening in the city that we have a weekly e-newsletter called the Bay Brief, and anyone can subscribe by visiting traverseCityMI.gov. And then, of course, we've got an election coming up next month on November 8th, and this week absentee ballots will be mailed to all of those who have requested them already. And as always, you can track the status of your ballot by going to michigan.gov/vote. And anyone who hasn't requested an absentee ballot that might be interested, I just want to remind folks that everyone in Michigan now has the right to vote absentee for any reason or no reason at all, and you can contact our office if you'd like an absentee ballot. That's all that I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, would you please go through the consent calendar for us?
Yes, the purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public can ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed from it and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests are automatically respected. If an item isn't removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Item 1, Consideration of approving the minutes of the September 19, 2022 and September 26, 2022 meetings of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 2, consideration of enacting an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances as a housekeeping matter to clarify the exception for separate entrances and exits for equivalent licenses as it relates to cannabis businesses. Item 3, consideration of enacting an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances which would allow and regulate enclosed spaces on rooftops to support certain rooftop amenities in certain zoning districts with limits on the hours allowed when adjacent to a residential district, is recommended by the Planning Commission. Enactment recommended. Item 4, consideration of waiving the competitive bidding process and authorizing an agreement for the restoration of pavers and repairs to the Snowmelt system at the Old Town Parking Garage. And, oh, my computer just did something interesting. One sec.
Mine does
all right.
interesting things all the time.
Yeah, that's a first for me. Thank you. We'll go old school here with paper. And consideration of concurring with the Downtown Development Authority Board of Trustees for the pursuit of a claim to recover expenses related to damages to the Old Town Parking Garage Snowmelt system. Approval recommended. Item 5, consideration of authorizing the annual payment for EMS reporting, which is above the amount previously authorized by the City Commission due to an increase in calls for services, and consideration of authorizing payment in the not-to-exceed annual amount of $20,000 per year for the remainder of the contract. Approval recommended. And finally, item 6, consideration of authorizing a purchase order for a compact excavator for use by Traverse City Light and Power. Approval recommended.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the commission like to have an item removed from the consent calendar?
Item 4, please.
You're welcome. Item 4, which is the emergency confirming purchase order for the Old Town paver project. Anyone from the audience would like to have an item removed? Let's go down. Item 3, please. Okay, item 3. Thank you. All right. Okay, we've had 2 items that were removed from the consent calendar. I have no idea how long these discussions will take, and I want to make sure there's plenty of time to do that. So before we get to those, unless there's unless the rest of the body does not concur, I'd like to go ahead and move up the Slabtown Neighborhood Association so that they don't have to stay for the entire meeting, if you do not mind. Okay. They are here under reserved public comment. They know they have 15 minutes, but they like to make a presentation as it relates to the Slabtown neighborhood and some of their activities. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Shore or to Mr. Cerny, whichever one you would like.
I'd like to hear from our clerk on that.
I just wanted to ask if you were going to take a motion on the consent calendar before they begin, or are you suspending that whole process?
That is a great idea. Who would like to make a motion to approving the remainder of the consent calendar, please?
I'll propose the motion that we accept the consent calendar as amended.
Okay, we have a motion
And
by
agenda as amended.
and with Ms. Shamrow.
I can't hear anything.
I don't know if we're live.
We're fine.
We're fine. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Shamrow to approve the consent calendar as amended.
Support.
Support by Ms. Stanley. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those nay, say aye or nay. Okay. Boy, y'all threw me off on that one. Threw myself off. Okay. Now we'll go with Mr. Shore. Thank you very much.
Mic isn't working. No, it's working a little while ago.
I know what it is. Just giving you a little extra moment to prepare. Very considerate.
We didn't want the timer working anyway. I'll start my timer.
There we go. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Shore, thank you.
I'm Sam Shore. I'm a resident of Traverse City, and I live at 432 North Madison Street. And I am president of the Slabtown Neighborhood Association. I want to thank you all very much for what you do each month to make the city a better place for all of us. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to make comments regarding the reconstitution of the Slabtown Neighborhood Association. Let me just say that the pandemic was not good to the association. It meant we did not meet for a good year. And then in January of this year, a small group of us got together and said, let's revitalize, let's reconstitute this association. And so we started meeting regularly, and prior to that, the Neighborhood Association has a long history, been a very vibrant group, and so we were happy to get people together again, which is what we did. We represent, as you know, most of you would know, the west side, the historic west side over in the Slabtown area, which is a pretty large area for our boundaries. So one of the first things we did was we got together and we said we need a plan, a strategic plan to drive us forward, and so that was our first order of business. And we ended up clarifying what our mission was, which I'll share with you, which is that the association will serve as a forum that brings together property owners and residents in Traverse City's historic west side to create a positive environment and one that promotes quality of life and maintains property value. We set about laying out 6 goal areas to focus on over the next year or two. And some of those had to do with just bringing our bylaws up to date, reforming our committee structures, which we have done. We also developed communication systems through a website and email to hook people up electronically. I encourage you at any time to visit our website at traversitysna.org to keep up with some of the things that are going on in our neighborhood. We also said we really want to build the membership so that it's truly representative, and so we've been actively doing that. We've had some pretty good attendance at our meetings that we've had over the last year. And then we also wanted to reestablish linkages with other neighborhood associations, and so I've been attending meetings of the presidents that we've been doing for the last several months. One of the other things is we said we want to have fun, and so we have a social committee, beach committee, that helps pull together activities for neighbors to get together and meet each other. We'll actually be having on my block, thanks to a couple folks here that are helping organize that, we are having a block party, which is a great time to meet our neighbors and kind of catch up. That's on October 9th. I think the key activity that really brings us here is that we said we want to reactivate our role as an organized advocate for issues that impact the neighborhood. And that includes, of course, the city, but also state and other groups that do things that impact the quality of life that is for our city, but particularly when it focuses on our neighborhood. We formed 4 subcommittees, and I'll just touch on them real briefly. Streets and Traffic, that's been a long-standing committee prior. We've reactivated that. That group has been focused on setting priorities. You're going to hear a little about that from Mr. Cerny. Buildings and Zoning, we really look at issues that, particularly the interface between commercial and residential, because our neighborhood has a buffer zone where we have a fair amount of commercial, which we're fine with. We just want to make sure we keep the character of the neighborhood as we go along. I mentioned the Beach Committee that organizes the beach cleanup, works with Superintendent Hunt on coordinating that, so they pick up all the trash and stuff we gather up and clean up from the beach. And then more recently, the master plan. We created an ad hoc committee to track on that and to bring the residents together around the master planning that you all have engaged in. So let me just, just so you see, the folks from Slabtown Neighborhood Association, you mind raising your hands? So these are some of the folks who've been involved. There's a whole bunch of others, and then we have some of our executive committee members here. I want to touch on some position statements that we recently adopted as an association, and one of those has to do with the MDOT project from Division on up to Cherry Bend Road, because that really will impact our neighborhood. Any traffic changes that shuttle people into the neighborhood is just something that will impact us, and we're fine with that. Our position is really we want a voice in that, and we want to connect with both the city and MDOT, because anything that comes off of that from the state work is going to come into your jurisdiction, the city's jurisdiction, as they come through our neighborhood. Also, short-term rentals is a hot topic in probably any neighborhood group, and we've taken the position that we feel like the arguments and the decisions around that need to be local and not totally taken over by the states. We're taking a strong position there and working with people both at the state level, and we'll be communicating with you about what we think is important. With that, let me turn it over to Mr. Cerny, who is going to talk about one other of our position statements.
Thank you, Sam. Benjamin, how many minutes do I have left?
8 minutes and
Oh,
43
great.
seconds.
Last time I was here,
Well, you just
I
took
got
up
kicked
30
out.
seconds.
I want to thank Sam for his role as our leader. It's a role that any leader understands. The work never ends, and it all seems to end up in the leader's lap, and I thank you, Sam. Sam and I co-chair our Streets and Traffic Committee in the neighborhood, and at the outset, I want to say that we're in admiration of the city staff for the work that they've done on our Madison and Jefferson project. That is a big, big project. We understand anytime you take those projects on and you've got a total rebuild of a street or more than one street, it's a big project. And the staff has been very good to involve our committee, the neighbors, the people that live on those streets, getting their input, and we appreciate that. That is something that we count on going forward as other projects like it happen. As I also have a hat on with the Beach Committee, I also want to recognize Michelle Hunt, your new Parks and Rec Director, who's doing a hell of a job for us, and I think the city, helping us keep Slabtown Beach, which is at the foot of Elmwood, a little jewel that very few people know about, but our neighborhood knows about it big time, and we've enjoyed it a great deal this summer. We've had a couple cleanups, and Michelle, with a front-end loader, has been down there to get rid of the stuff and help keep our beach a really, really nice little beach for the neighborhood and anybody else that wants to use it. So I want to thank her for that and her work on Ashton and Darrell Parks, which are in our neighborhood, and she's doing a lot of good for both of those parks. In presenting our association's priorities for street renovation and repair, please know that this is the voice of several hundred homes in the neighborhood. It's not a single individual saying, I want my street fixed. We've talked to our entire association, our committee, 7 or 8 people, rounded throughout all the streets in the neighborhood, looked at them, and made some judgments about which ones they think need to be taken care of in your future planning. So we speak as a group of homeowners, and we'd like you to keep it in mind when you are allocating funds for future city street improvements. I believe that you've received these priorities from us in advance, so you've seen this, and you know that Monroe Street is far and away our biggest priority. It is the busiest street in our neighborhood, gets tons of traffic coming down from Leelanau County, both from 72 and 22, coming down, particularly on Monroe. And the wear and tear on that street is very significant. I urge you to get over there to take a look at it yourself if you haven't been there. We think it's long overdue for rebuilding. We know it's one of those arteries that when you get into it, you're going to have to take out the infrastructure underneath it like you did Elmwood and like you're planning to do for Madison, Jefferson. So it's a big, expensive project, but we know that it really needs to get done. And we urge you to make that one of your top priorities as you plan the allocation of city funding going forward. We looked at other streets, and the others on this list are partial street areas of streets that need to be repaired or replaced. Randolph Street from city limits to Elmwood, Cedar Street from Front to Second, Willow Street from Madison to Monroe, that's just a one-block piece. And Second Street on the other side of Division, and our association does include a section there behind Little Bows and that neighborhood there. That's part of Slabtown. And so we have, there's a priority in one of their streets. So those are the priorities. We urge you to keep them in mind. We know the decisions on future funding are going to come months, years ahead, but we hope that you keep us in mind, and we certainly know that your staff is going to talk to us as these things come along. And I thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We thank you for taking the time. We thank you for the neighborhood being active again in taking on the task. And Maya, that's your neighborhood. You got
It is.
I know you've probably been engaged.
Not as much as I would like to. Tuesday nights are a difficult time with the board meetings I have to attend for my day job, but I have attended some of the meetings, and I really appreciate having the body organized again and having the social activities as well as the engagement with the city and city staff. And thank you all for the time that you put into that. I know it's been a tremendous undertaking, and so as a resident of Monroe Street, I very much appreciate the attention that you're bringing to the traffic that artery receives, because it gets some very high-speed cars traveling over some very rough terrain, and as I know you all know, but truly as a group of citizens who's really brought something back from the brink of non-existence due to COVID, it's amazing what you've achieved in the last year, so thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You're more than welcome to stay through the entire meeting if there's something on here you're interested in, but thank you for being here and your participation. It's much appreciated. So, Mr. Cerny, Mr. Shore, thank you. Okay. We'll head back to the items that were removed from the consent calendar. We have item 4, which was the consent calendar, which was the emergency confirming service order regarding the Old Town Paver project. Mr. Warner.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm supportive of pursuing the claim, but the other portion of this recommendation I'm not supportive of. I'd like us, again, as with last week, to consider our strategic priority to view all of our goals and actions through the lens of climate impacts. And also for this specifically, to ask why are we doing it? And to me, we're doing it to keep a driveway free of snow and ice. And for $200,000 to $250,000, there are many ways we could achieve that. And just by way of example, that's approximately 2,500 square feet that we're looking to keep clear of snow and ice. A solar canopy could be installed for about $200,000, and that would actually make energy and money, as opposed to burning fossil fuels in a boiler and spending money every year to melt the snow and ice. And then on top of that, with the recent Inflation Reduction Act, we're probably eligible for about 30% reduction in that cost, even as a nonprofit entity that we are. So a final cost is probably in the range of $130,000 to $150,000, and we'll have something that generates money, essentially, by generating energy. So I would ask that we send this back to the TDA and have them look into other options for keeping this clear of snow and ice, because it is such a large price tag. If this was only a matter of $20,000 or $30,000, I'd be all for it. But for such an investment, I think it behooves us to at least ask for alternatives and what it is we're trying to achieve. Thanks.
Okay. Okay.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nicole Vaness, Transportation Mobility Director. With this project, I was very shy in bringing this back to you because this started off as just being a paver project. And so we had replaced the boilers last fall. They were ready to go over the winter months. And so this was simply just resetting the pavers. We had some ruts. We needed to fix some drainage issues that we had that were causing some settling of the crushed stone. And it ended up being a larger project, which is coming before you tonight, because of the damage that occurred when the previous contractor removed the pavers and then disappeared, essentially. So that's why there is a second motion to move forward with a claim against that contractor. But the damage that occurred is such that we now went from a paving project to having to completely replace all of the glycol tubing. I do understand that, with the cost, we, again, replaced the boilers last year. The boilers are what support the glycol tubing in the system to heat it up. In that location, as far as snow removal, we have looked to see if there are other ways that we could remove snow. We do have Ivy Terrace to the west and Capri to the east. We also get a lot of snow buildup kicked up from 8th Street that creates mounds, and so it's difficult sometimes. I think the fire department has been called out sometimes to rescue vehicles because people haven't known who to call in the way of getting stuck. So I know that there could be some other options, but at this point, we have not found a solution yet that would replace the efficiency of being able to melt the snow in that drive lane, other than the glycol tubes.
Okay. Are there any other questions that we have? Okay. Yes.
If I might, just maybe, when I said solar canopy, essentially it's a roof. You put a roof over it, and then snow and rain does not fall on the pavement, and then there's no snow or ice to remove.
Except that which is kicked up by plows or falls off of vehicles.
Fair enough, but we have that at every driveway and every entrance throughout town. Yes.
Okay. We have a request to move forward with a repairs in the amount not to exceed $248,000. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion? Yes.
I'll make two motions, as I'm reading the room here. That the mayor and city clerk execute a contract with Northern QMS of Grand Rapids, Michigan for the restoration of pavers and repairs to the Snowmelt system at the Old Town Garage in an amount not to exceed $248,000 with funds available in the Old Town Parking Fund and Surplus Fund, with the contract subject to its substance by the city manager and its form by the city attorney.
Okay. We're going to take them separately?
Yes.
Good idea. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Support.
Okay, Mr. Treadwell. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to address this? Okay. All those in favor of the first motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
No?
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Werner?
No?
Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes.
And Mayor Lewis?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And I'll make the motion that the city commission approve pursuing a claim with Northern Michigan Hardscapes to recover expenses related to the damages to the Old Town parking deck snowmelt system to be coordinated by the city attorney.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there support? Mr. Wilson supports. Thank you. Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. All right. Next item from the consent calendar that was removed is item 3, which is an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances, which would allow and regulate enclosed spaces on rooftops. I abbreviated, didn't read the whole thing. Ms. Scordato, you removed this, so I'll let you.
And I'll just state the rules for public comment. Please state your name and address, indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep. And finally, we ask that all language be respectful to all parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Denny Scordato, 422 State Street. I am a city resident of 30 years. I do have some concerns with this text amendment, especially as it relates to rooftop bars and entertainment. One question that comes to mind is, wouldn't this text amendment essentially make 45-foot zones 60-foot zones and 60-foot zones 75-foot zones, which flies in the face of our attempt to graduate the heights down as they get towards neighborhoods. I also notice that this affects all zones in the city except R1 and R2. I live in the Boardman neighborhood. My block is all single-family homes, even though it's zoned R2. But directly across the street from me, it's zoned R3. So this tells me that potentially in the future, there could be a project across the street from me that could have a rooftop bar and evening entertainment. This also affects D districts. There's a D district on 8th Street, which is across the alley from the homes on the south side of Webster Street in Boardman neighborhood, across the alley. That's pretty close. This is, if approved, will drastically impact residential neighborhoods, especially mine. Why not start out small instead of painting this with such a broad brush? Scale it back, please give more consideration to residential neighborhoods. And as a side note, there just seems to be too many of these text amendments that have been occurring before we've even updated the master plan. I strongly feel that this is backwards. We need to focus on updating the master plan instead of making all these text amendments. And in closing, there was a comment on our neighborhood Facebook page about this, and it was simply, whatever happened to a healthier drinking culture? Because it does seem that this is encouraging rooftop bars everywhere in the city. So I can't support it, and I hope that some of you do not also. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Denny. Okay. Sean, do you want to try to respond to some of the questions, please?
Yeah, definitely. Sean Winter, City Planning Director. This came before the Planning Commission by staff on recommendation of the city attorney because we kept getting requests for rooftop amenities. Not always commercial amenities, but again, rooftop access is not prohibited in our zoning ordinance. It's just having enclosed space on the rooftop. And oftentimes we'd have to have the developers remove those things such as storage closets for furniture up there or even bathroom space for residents. So we put together this amendment. I do want to clarify from the previous speaker that if a use is not allowed in the district, this doesn't suddenly allow it. So for instance, R3 does not allow food and beverage service, so that is not allowed in that district. Only the districts where it's allowed would it be allowed to occur in a small enclosed space on the rooftop. And we're getting more and more of these requests because I think people have gotten used to the desire of being outdoors as a result of the pandemic. We started changing our behaviors, having sidewalk cafes, things like that. We're also hearing from some of the developers that, obviously there's a desire for the views our area creates, but even for these residential spaces, that rooftop access, residential buildings rather, creates an opportunity for community. So someone spoke at our planning commission who lives in TC Lofts, and they have an enclosed space upstairs, and every Sunday residents go up and watch football together, and so it's an opportunity to build community within these projects. So that's why this was brought before the planning commission. They made a few recommendations from what staff had originally proposed. They picked the districts where you're more likely to have commercial activity and multifamily dwellings. It does limit outdoor food and beverage service from 10:30 p.m. to 6 a.m., which is what the Planning Commission landed on about two or 1.5 years ago when they revised the D2 district on 8th Street. Also, the noise limitations up there, those are limited from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. to be consistent with the noise ordinance. This also requires a setback from the facades of the buildings that are facing a public street or in our district to minimize the impact and, of course, the amount of area on top of the building that these identified amenities can occupy is limited as well, because we're not trying to establish a new story, just a small space that can pop above the established height limit.
So again, one of the concerns was that in R3, you're saying that R3 districts does not allow food or beverage.
Correct.
In this amendment, will still not allow it.
Still not allowed, yep,
Okay.
because there is, it's
Other
not
thing
listed as a
is
use.
that, also, if I remember correctly from when it was introduced, no matter what, nothing can go above 60 feet
Without a vote of the people, that's correct.
without a vote of people.
Yep.
So if it goes, okay,
So if they have an antenna on top of that,
can't go above 60 feet,
Nope.
period.
As of today, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Or would you like me to read it, because I can read it fast?
Sure.
This would be the motion that someone should make, if they would like to, is that the following amendments to the Traverse City Code of Ordinances, which are recommended by the Planning Commission, which are introduced on September 6, 2022, be enacted with an effective date 8 days after publication, which would allow and regulate enclosed spaces on rooftops to support certain rooftop amenities in certain zoning districts with limits on the hours allowed when adjacent to a residential district. Chapter 1336, Chapter 1336 R3 Multiple Family District, Chapter 1338, Chapter 1338 HR Hotel Resort District, Chapter 1340, Chapter 1340C-1 Office Service District, Chapter 1342, Chapter 1342 C2 Neighborhood Center Districts, Chapter 1344, Chapter 1344 C3 District Community Center District, Chapter 1346, Chapter 1346 C4 Regional Center District, and Chapter 1347, Chapter 1347D Development Districts. Now,
As
who
a
wants to
fan
make
of
that motion?
rooftop amenities, I'll make that motion.
And we do have a second for that, or support? Support from Mr. Wilson. Okay, we have motion, we have support. Any other comments from the neighborhood, please, or neighborhood, from the audience? Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. One of the things that I look at on things like this, if it comes out of the Planning Commission, if that's so much support, then I'm going to more or less go with them, because their job is to really beat these things up pretty good, and I hope they have, and I'm sure they have. So thank you. All right, we go to old business, and the first item in there is consideration of entering into a closed session to discuss the negotiations of a collective bargaining agreement with the Traverse City firefighters. There is a proposed motion, and we would go into closed session at the end of public comment.
And action is anticipated once you emerge from closed session.
That is correct. Okay. Who would like to make that motion, please?
I've got my screen open. I'll move that the City Commission enter into closed session immediately following the public comment portion of the agenda to discuss strategy and negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement with the firefighters Local 646 pursuant to MCL 15.268C, subsection C.
Okay, we have a motion. Support?
I'll support.
Okay, Ms. Wilson, Ms. Stanley? Thank you. Ms. Stanley. Ms. Wilson's not here tonight. Maybe in spirit, but not really. Okay. Okay, we have a motion, support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right.
And I do have to do a roll call vote
That's
as a
right, you do have to do
technicality. Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Werner,
Yes.
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to go to new business, and the next item is consideration of approving the city manager's recommendation to provide a one-time non-president setting $500 payment to all full-time city employees. So, Mr.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Commissioners. As you're aware, the city did receive the ARPA funds. We've discussed several of the different concepts, and we're coming back next Monday to continue to discuss at the study session those concepts. The two that have been discussed and I've been given some primary direction on, the first was during the budget season on $200,000 going towards trees, in which we're currently in the process of working with Davies on an update of our canopy study, which will help us with the placement of those trees. The second one was in a previous meeting, a couple of meetings back, in regard to this concept that was presented. This would be a one-time non-precedent setting, which means then we also, if approved, I go meet with the unions. I've had verbals with them on the letters of understanding and proceed forward. This would be basically in terms of what the inflationary factors, a retention one-time payment of $500 per employee. Now, this is also inclusive of the city proper, as well as the staff from the Traverse City Light and Power and the Downtown Development Authority.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm supportive of this, but I've seen now in the, as I had some couple emails and a text this morning about the comments in the ticker article about how this was due to inflation. You just mentioned inflation yourself, but ARPA doesn't allow for inflationary factors. This is under ARPA's guidelines of service during COVID and some of the other extraordinary circumstances our workers have had to face lately, correct? I think that's gotten mixed up, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act passing.
Right, and that's why I mentioned the retention factors, because that is directly related to the COVID. We've had a lot of issues and discussions within the professionals of the impacts, not just within the community, but also with the employees and mental health and such. And so that can have an impact in regard to the overall health of the staff.
Absolutely, and that's why I was clarifying, because using inflation with the Inflation Reduction Act recently passed, I think confused some people that I was hearing from. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public.
Thank you. Okay. Got any other questions you'd like to ask? I know we discussed this a while back during one of our the last time we had a session about the use of ARPA funds. I think it was the consensus amongst us at that time that this would be a good use of the funds and to proceed forward with that. I'm not sure that the total amount will be that comes out of this, but like, do you remember what that amount was?
I do. We had from the initial discussions, I had added the TCLP staff and DDA.
You may have had it in here.
So that added an additional 62 employees approximately.
So
that would add another roughly $20,000 to $30,000.
So total amount.
Approximately $125,000.
Okay. So out of this $1,600,000 that we have, then we have dispersed, well, approximately $325,000. So just kind of give that number in your head as we get ready to talk next week about other uses of those funds. Just pass that along. Okay. With that, I'll be glad to entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that the City Commission approve a one-time, non-precedent-setting salary premium payment of $500 for regular full-time employees of the city, approximately 150 employees, including Traverse City Light and Power employees, approximately 40 employees, and Downtown Development Authority auto parking services employees, approximately 22 employees, with funding to come from state and local fiscal recovery funds, SLFRF, under ARPA, and further that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to letters of understanding for each of the collective bargaining units with the city manager's approval as to substance and the city attorney's approval as to form. Is there a word?
It should say execute. Our
Okay.
apologies. I'll add that in there.
Authorized to execute
Yeah.
letters.
Thank
of
you.
understanding. Support.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a good word to put in there. Okay, good. All right, okay. Okay, we have a motion to support. Is there any questions from or thoughts from the audience? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, under new business, we have a request from Commissioner Warner as it relates to adopting of a resolution of a complete street policy as a complete street policy. Commissioner Warner, you want to start with this, or would you like me to start with this?
No, I'm happy to start. And I think this is in our the document that lists our goals and strategic priorities was to update the Complete Streets resolution. And I do want to point out in the recommendation here, there is an error in the last sentence because in 2011, what was approved was a Complete Streets resolution, not a Complete Streets policy. So we've never had a Complete Streets policy. What it is listed under City Commission policies, but what it is a Complete Streets, actually I have to look at it because it's attached here. It's the final page. It's a resolution of support for City of Traverse City Complete Streets policy. So there's no actual policy. It's just a resolution. And then in the resolved portion of that, it states that the intent and whatnot, and the word policy is in the resolved, like the hereby declares its support of Complete Streets policies and to the extent, et cetera, et cetera. So generically, since 2011, we've been intending to follow Complete Streets policies, but we did not have a policy, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought you know, again, it's in our documents, goals, and strategic priorities that we're currently working toward. So I thought I'd put some time in, just update the resolution. So the resolution is very similar, and put together a policy to get us going. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Regardless whether there was a policy or not a policy, and obviously there's not one, because I went home today and tried to find one. There's not an actual policy. There's just a resolution. So what I would like to do and recommend is that we refer this to an October 24th study session for further discussion. Even if we didn't do it, if there was a policy, that would have been done back in 2011. It's been 11 years. Sometimes policies need to be revisited and looked at to make sure we're going all in the same direction. I wasn't here when that policy wouldn't. I don't think any of us were here when that policy was put in or that resolution was done. So it probably wouldn't hurt us to have a more open discussion about it at that time. If there's no actual policy, well, then we can't ask for a red line version, what's going to change or not change. The recommended policy that Commissioner Warner has put together could all be red line, couldn't it, at this point? I would also like to see a red line version of the resolution, just to see what is different, so staff could put that together at that point. That'd be great. Also, I want to know how the Traverse City, part of that discussion, if you haven't read it, but there's a Traverse City Street Design Manual. Where does that fit in all this? Because that was done back when I was on the City Commission, that was undergoing, and afterwards it got, we paid out money to a consultant to help us with this. I'd like to know where that's going. Also, what about the current efforts or in the work of the Transportation Mobility Plan? Where would that fit into our policy, and how would we look at that? I'd like to make sure there's input from staff, or whether the Planning Commission needs to weigh in on some of this also. I anticipate that hopefully if we get through all this, that perhaps we could have this back on a November 21st regular meeting agenda that we can take further consideration if we so choose. We can't do it on the 7th because we won't have a meeting on the 7th. So that's my thought and my idea of how we should move this forward. So, Commissioner Samro, you had your hand up. So.
Well, I guess I would say because we did discuss this during the agenda review, and you kind of touched on it, but essentially, yeah, I'm interested in pursuing this, but I know that this staff saw this when we did in the packet, and so I definitely would like staff's input at the study session as well as what we might, as you said, red line or hammer out.
Yeah, if you please. Mr. Warner?
I was just going to say, because you asked about how this fits in with the master plan and mobility plan, and I tried to state that in a sentence here. Like, to me, it's just restating and strengthening this body's commitment to complete streets. So it's our intent that helps guide that mobility plan.
Okay.
That's how it fits.
Okay. But, I mean, we can have that further discussion as we get closer to it. So, thank you.
We can, and I might, for the benefit of the others here, address the street, what was it called? You mentioned it, the street plan, the street book.
Yeah.
What was it?
It was called the
So that's
Traverse City Street Design Manual.
right. So that is a staff document and has been, because there's been tension since 2011 between the City Commission and staff about the direction that the city was taking. And so that's a staff adopted document, never adopted by the City Commission. The City Commission and Planning Commission were pursuing a active transportation plan roughly 10 years ago to 8 years ago. A plan was developed in cooperation with TART and others in the community, and that plan then I'll say died in committee. It got put on a shelf and never saw the light of day to make its way through the Planning Commission. It was a Planning Commission ad hoc committee, but with input from the City Commission. And that's partly what prompted the city pattern book as far as streets, because that was then staff's response. They didn't like the active transportation plan, so that was staff's response. So here we are today with an opportunity to strengthen our commitment to complete streets.
So that's the game plan if everyone's okay with that. Okay.
That,
I'm asking,
I
I'm
mean,
seeing
does
heads up and down.
anybody else have anything? Questions, anything?
Do we need a motion to refer it to?
No.
No.
But I like having dates so that we know when it's going to be coming back to us instead of saying some future meeting. So that's why I've asked that way. Okay. All right. Staff, are you okay?
I understand, we've got the dates down, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll take it from there. Thank you, Mr. Warren, for bringing this together. Even if there was a policy, 11 years later, you still need to update whatever we have. So I think it'll be a good discussion. So, but as you and I have talked before, Tim, I like to throw everything on the table and see what we got and don't have. So where it fits and doesn't fit. So, okay. With that, we have appointments, none. We have a lot of reports, announcements, and correspondence. And we've gone through the reserved public comment. Now I'll go and do this for general public comment. Going once, going twice. Done. Okay, comments from the mayor and city commissioners? Yes, ma'am.
I'll just make a quick statement that, as many people might have realized, we held Pride here last weekend. It's going to be held in the fall permanently now. A lot of places celebrate Pride in June, but ours is celebrating in last weekend of September, I think it's the 28th through the 1st of October. And I just wanted to share that I really appreciate this community coming out and support. A lot of people came up during the weekend to say that they don't feel like they can always celebrate themselves in their own communities, in neighboring communities, and that they appreciate that Traverse City is a safe place, and not just a safe place because we host Pride, but also because we have codified by the vote of the people in 2014 to protect non-discrimination or to have protective non-discrimination policies. So I just think sometimes it deserves being mentioned what we are doing and the impact it can have in the overall community. So,
And thank you for standing in my place on Saturday afternoon. I do appreciate that.
that our balloon was really unwieldy in the wind, but it was very fun.
But my ice cream with the grandkids were good too. So
Excellent.
there you go. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right. With that, we're going to go into closed session. There will be there will be a
Anticipate action.
action taken when we come back. Thank you. Good. All right, it is 8:10. We are back in session. We went into closed session to discuss some of the details of the collective bargaining agreement with firefighters local 646. There is a tentative agreement, a negotiated agreement with that body, and the firefighters local has already agreed to the proposed agreement. So with that, I think the recommended motion should be that the City Commission authorize execution of a 4-year agreement expiring on June 30th, 2025 with firefighters local 646 pursuant to 646 to be executed by the mayor and city clerk with pursuant to the other stuff of the as subject to content by the city manager and deformed by the city attorney. You can put it in the right words. Is that close enough?
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay, that's the motion. Anyone want to second that motion?
Whatever Ben writes is the motion that I approve.
I think I hit the highlights of it all.
Yes.
So anyway, so
You
and
said the words in mostly the right order.
most of it. So I used to do this much better. So who was the second on that, please? Okay, Mitch. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Okay, do we have any other announcements tonight? Yes, sir.
I wanted to announce that the staff has come with a letter offer to an HR director, and I received the copy of it signed today. This individual comes to us with experience in HR and in county management, and her name is Christine Bosley.
Oh, wow.
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you very much. Oh, she's coming back.
She'll start November 21st.
Welcome back, Christine.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, with that, unless there's anybody who wants to hang around longer, I hereby say we are adjourned.
Where's she now?
She was over at Benton County with Katie. As you know, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She missed it. Either she got sick of the kid.
Yeah, right.